Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs are confirmed for the Players Era NIL tournament in 2025, and it sure looks like NIL-based MTEs is the wave of the future.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Thursday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Well, Rivals updated their 2025 class rankings, and every single player Gonzaga is targeting moved up. We're going to talk about that. Also, new media rights deal for the Big East. What does that mean for Gonzaga? And a massive story that is just developing right now in the Big 12. We're going to talk about all of that. But first, part of Gonzaga's 2025-26 non-conference schedule has been confirmed. The Zags are going to participate in the Players Era NIL tournament in Las Vegas next year during Feast Week. It will be their MTE. We've talked about the Players Era NIL tournament a handful of times already on this show. We talked about it when it first became a thing that we were hearing about, and we started to see the teams come out for the 2024 event. We saw that Gonzaga was not involved in the 24 event, but that their name had been floated as a potential candidate to join the event in 2025. And then we saw that Creighton, who was scheduled to be in the battle for Atlantis, potentially matching up against Gonzaga, decided to pull their name out of the battle for Atlantis and instead enter the Players Era NIL tournament. They were replaced by Providence for the battle for Atlantis, but it highlighted what we kind of expect is going to be the wave of the future for multi-team events in college basketball. Because simply put, if you can offer every school that participates in your event money for NIL just for participating in the event, you're going to get the best of the best. Any team that you want is going to pick going to an event where their players get paid money just for participating over any other event. And it just makes sense. As a reminder, the Players Era tournament, again, this is going to be its first year this season in 24-25. The reports right now are that every team that participates, it's currently an 8-team tournament, will get $1 million in NIL money. My understanding is that the coaches can divvy that up however they want. I think it's fairly assumed that you will divide it up amongst your scholarship athletes, but they have options. And there's like other requirements, like just because we are still technically not quite in the pay for play era, although there's not really any rules preventing that. But the players will have probably social media posts they'll have to do, autograph signings, speakings, various things at the event that they'll have to do in order to earn their money. But effectively, your team is in this event, your team gets $1 million that gets spread out amongst your players. You can use that in recruiting. You can say, hey, come to our team. We're going to get you this much amount of money, and you're going to get, 1/12 of $1 million, the kind of thing. So that's the future. That's what we're going to continue to see. And we know that because the 2024 event, the first year that it happened, is stacked. The matchups came out specifically. They're very baffling, by the way. Houston versus Alabama in the first round is a shocking matchup, especially when you compare it to Rutgers versus Notre Dame. No disrespect. Rutgers has two of the top prospects in the entire high school class joining their team this year. I think Notre Dame's heading in the right direction under new coach Micah Shrewsbury. But Rutgers versus Notre Dame, when you compare it to Houston versus Alabama, those should probably not both be first-round games. The other two games are San Diego State versus Texas A&M, which should be a fun matchup, and then Oregon versus Creighton, a rematch of a game that took place last year in the NCAA tournament, and Dana Altman, longtime head coach at Creighton, who has now been the longtime head coach at Oregon. So there's some fun intrigue in that matchup as well. Those are the 8 teams participating in this event in 2024. In 2025, those same 8 teams are going to participate. Most teams who sign up for this event are signing up for a 3-year period of time. As of right now, as I'm recording this, we do not know if Gonzaga's agreement to be involved in 2025 is a 3-year agreement, a 2-year agreement, or just a one-off agreement. We'll hopefully find out more information about that at a later date. But again, Houston, Alabama, Rutgers, Notre Dame, San Diego State, Texas A&M, Oregon, Creighton. Those are the 8 teams in the event this year. Those 8 teams will be in the event next year, along with Gonzaga, Michigan, Syracuse, St. John's, and St. Joe's. That is 13 teams. The event is going to be a 16-team MTE, and right now, again, as I'm recording this, the tournament is targeting 3 more schools to round out their top 16. Those 3 schools, Duke, Kansas, Virginia. This thing's going to be loaded. St. Joe's is a bit of an outlier, but otherwise this is going to be a loaded field if they can get those final 3 schools. And if they don't get Duke, Kansas, Virginia, if they get 2 of them, 1 of them, the other schools they add are going to be pretty big time, whoever it may be. They're going to find some of the best programs in college basketball, and they're going to toss them into this tournament. And again, I keep mentioning it feels like the future because other MTEs, they're going to need to adapt. They're going to need to adapt. There's no debate in my mind that if you want to continue to operate as one of college basketball's premier multi-team events in Feast Week, like we've seen with ESPN Events Invitational, like we've seen with Maui Invitational, the Phil Knight Invitational, Battle for Atlantis, obviously, where Gonzaga will be this year, you're going to have to probably start paying out NIL money. I think you can probably survive as an MTE if you only offer money for the winner. So you pull together $500K, you pull together $1 million, and you say, hey, the winning team gets $1 million. Because a lot of these MTEs are not going to be able to pull together. I mean, what in 2025 is going to be $16 million. More than that, actually, $16 million for each of the teams that participate. And there's rumors that there's an additional $1 million or so in NIL cash for the winner. So you assume next year that the Players Era Tournament is going to put together somewhere in the ballpark of $17 million that is just going to pay the teams. I have a feeling Maui cannot do that. I have a feeling Atlantis cannot do that. They're not set up structurally to be paying out millions of dollars to the teams that participate in their event. That doesn't mean that can't change. They can't get more money from sponsors. They can't find angel investors. They can't find ways to make this work. But I think what I'm saying is they're going to have to. Like there's not a choice unless they want to just severely dilute their product. Because teams that don't typically get invited to Maui are probably still going to go if they're not faced with options that are going to pay the school money. And it's like, well, we could go to Maui or we could go to, so-and-so Joe Schmo MTE that's only 4 teams that doesn't really generate a lot of interest, or we could go to Maui and play in this prestigious tournament and still not get paid money. So Maui's still going to exist. It's just they're going to be, a lot of A10 teams, a lot of Mountain West teams, a lot of mid-major teams, or just not very good high major programs. Whereas the best programs, which have traditionally played in Maui, like last year when there was Purdue and Tennessee and Marquette and Gonzaga and UCLA and Syracuse, that is not going to happen anymore in that tournament because those teams, the majority of them, are going to go to tournaments like the Players Era Tournament. So the future of these 3-game, 3-day, 16-team tournaments is going to change pretty significantly and frankly pretty quickly. The day Creighton decided to no longer participate in Atlantis and to go play in this tournament, that was a huge sign of what was to come. So we're already starting to see it happen. Are these tournaments going to start offering NIL cash? Can they offer NIL cash? Are schools like Gonzaga going to just stay? Again, like I said, at this point, we don't know if Gonzaga is going to sign up for the same tournament 3 years in a row. From a fan base perspective, you want to see some variety. You like seeing them play in Maui. You like seeing them play in Atlanta, in the Bahamas. You like seeing them in different tournaments. I love that they come to Portland for the Phil Knight Invitationals as somebody who gets to go to those games. Going to Vegas every single year, especially when they already go to Vegas for the WCC tournament, that's not as appealing. But at the same time, if you're Mark Few and you're Gonzaga staff and you're weighing like, do we want to keep going to the same place where, maybe our fans are a little bit less engaged or just kind of like, oh, we're not as excited about that, but we're making real money and we can recruit better. We can land better recruits. We can land better players in the portal because we can offer them this extra amount of money. Like you got to weigh the pros and the cons. And this is a quote that I saw in the article Matt Norlander wrote a while ago when the Players Era Tournament was first kind of cropping up. It was an anonymous coach who said this, and I'm paraphrasing the quote, but they basically said, I would play in the Mandalay Bay parking lot if it got my team $1 million in NIL money. And I think that is a quote that most coaches would say. Honestly, I think that most coaches would believe that. Their focus right now is getting enough cash to get the players that they want to get into their program. And if that involves playing in this tournament, if that involves signing up for 3 straight years to play in this tournament, they're going to do it because you have to adapt or die. You do not want to be the coach who holds out, who says, I'm going to continue to operate the same way I always have. I'm not going to adjust. I'm not going to change. You end up getting left behind. And Mark Few and the Zags have never been left behind. This never happens to them. They're always on the cutting edge. They're always kind of advancing the sport. And so to me, their involvement is a pretty good indication that this is kind of the wave of the future for college athletics. Well, folks, Rivals updated their class rankings in 2025, and all 4 of Gonzaga's targets moved up the list. We got more on that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about today's sponsor, Game Time. Folks, it is minor league baseball season. I live 10 minutes away from the Hillsboro Hops. I'm going to a game on Father's Day. Incredibly excited for that opportunity. And one of the great things about being so close to inexpensive professional baseball is that I can make last-minute decisions on whether I want to go to the game or not. And Game Time is the perfect place to get those last-minute tickets because prices on Game Time, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat feature, and Game Time's lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And if you're somebody who's concerned about getting tickets that are fake and you're going to get turned away at the door, one of the nice things about that is Game Time has the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry, and it gives me great peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Get those 2 tickets to a Hillsboro Hops game for $3 for you and a significant other. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, $20 off. Terms do apply. Download the Game Time app today, folks. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, Stanley Patton's still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are talking 2025 recruiting targets for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. It is the big storyline right now for Gonzaga. Their 2024 roster is very nearly set. 12 out of 13 scholarships are filled. We will see if they end up filling that final spot or not. But attention turns to 2025. Gonzaga has had their eyes on a handful of players in this class. There's 4 in particular that Gonzaga has made offers to, that they're meeting with, that they've flown out to watch, that have come to campus. These 4 players are the big name targets for Gonzaga in the 2025 recruiting class. And Rivals, typically, for those of you who are everyday listeners who listen to the show regularly, first of all, thank you. I appreciate having you around. I typically use 24/7 Sports or On3 when I'm talking about recruiting rankings, but I do want to have a little bit more variety and talk about some of the differences that places like ESPN and in this case Rivals kind of have with some of those rankings. And good opportunity to do so today as Rivals re-updated their 2025 class rankings. A lot of sites are doing that right now after the Pangos All-American Camp, after some of the other EYBL events that we have seen this summer. We're starting to see some players rise and fall on those rankings. So I want to talk about Gonzaga's 4 targets right here, where they are at Rivals, and any updates we have on their recruitment from Gonzaga. Start with Isaiah Harwell. Isaiah Harwell is number 8 right now in Rivals' top 20 or in Rivals' rankings for the 2025 class. He was 10th. For him to have moved from 10th to 8th, always a good sign when you see a player moving up. He moved up from 10th to 8th despite being injured since early February. He suffered an injury that cost him the rest of that season. It happened right before Gonzaga was set to play St. Mary's in Spokane because he was supposed to take his official visit that weekend. That game was on February 3rd. He ultimately took his official visit 3 weeks later on February 24th, visited for Gonzaga's win over Santa Clara. So Harwell's moving up the rankings despite being injured right now. It could also be more of a sign that a few players just moved down the rankings and Harwell kind of moved up in their spot. But still, he was a top 10 player before this. He's a top 10 player still at Rivals and really everywhere else. I think he's very consistently in the top 10 of the 2025 class rankings. 6'6" guard from Pocatello, Idaho, has had Gonzaga in his top 10 for a while, Gonzaga's been considered the favorite to land him for a long time, but his recruitment has kind of slowed down a little bit right now. North Carolina's in the mix. There's some other Houston's in the mix, some other big name programs that are in the mix here, but he last played at Wasatch Academy in Utah, same high school that Nolan Hickman went to. So there is a connection there as well. Speaking of guys that have been on Gonzaga's radar for a long time in the 2025 class, Nik Khamenia is a 4-star forward from Studio City, California, of Harvard Westlake High School. He was 49th at Rivals and now is up to 40th, the biggest jump of anybody on this list from their most recent rankings to now. And Khamenia was a guy who was not even in the top 100 on a lot of places as recently as the start of last season, like in November when he came to visit, or in October, when he came to visit for an official visit at Gonzaga. He took an official visit in October for Craziness in the Kennel, and he took an unofficial visit for Craziness in the Kennel way back in 2022. That's why I mentioned he's been on Gonzaga's radar for a very, very long time. He was playing with the FIBA U18 team, representing the United States as their starting power forward. Very cool opportunity for him to be in that conversation as one of the best U.S. under 18 prospects in the entire country. USC's interested, UCLA's interested. There's been a lot of pushes from other programs lately. I know a lot of people are concerned because it feels like, Gonzaga's been really involved in his recruitment, and then we haven't heard anything in a long time. Whenever he talks about his recruiting, he does mention Gonzaga. He talks about the family atmosphere. He talks about being on campus. So it's clear that Gonzaga is still very high on his radar right now. But yes, it is a situation where when you start recruiting a kid when they're a young high schooler and they don't commit till they're, entering their senior year, which is pretty typical. It's not like Khamenia or any of these. I mean, none of these guys are committed yet. Most of the guys in that 2025 class are not committed. So it's not a concern that he's not committed. But I understand why having his name been floated around for, at this point, multiple years. And it feels like, why haven't we heard anything from Khamenia yet? Hopefully we'll hear something soon. But the main thing we know about Nik Khamenia is he is rocketing up those rankings at every different outlet that does rankings. He has continued to move up. Next up is Jalen Haralson. Jalen Haralson is the highest rated recruit on Gonzaga's radar in the 2025 class. He is up to 7, one spot ahead of Isaiah Harwell. Harwell went from 10th to 8th. Jalen Haralson went from 8th to 7th. So again, kind of proves the theory that a few guys might just be moving down the rankings a little bit, but that still helps both Harwell and Haralson be in the top 8. Haralson is a 6'6" wing from LaPorte, Indiana. And among the 4 players on this list, I feel comfortable saying that Jalen Haralson feels like the least likely to end up in Spokane. He's already visited Auburn. He's visited a handful of schools in Indiana, his home state, including Notre Dame, Purdue, and Indiana. He has not been out to visit Gonzaga in Spokane, although he did recently indicate that he would like to set up a visit to Gonzaga. So that is a great sign. As much as Haralson may be the least likely to end up at Gonzaga, Gonzaga is still very much in the mix here. They're still communicating with him. They're still talking to him. He has shown an interest in coming to campus. If Mark Few can get you on campus, there's a chance. There's always a chance if you can get on campus. Now, Haralson, again, from Indiana, looking at a lot of schools in Indiana, already showed interest in Auburn. It's going to be a tougher sale than it might be for some of these other guys, but do not want to discount Jalen Haralson, especially with him expressing interest in wanting to come to Spokane and see campus. And then finally, number 4, the player we've talked about the most recently, Davis Fogle, 6'7" guard/wing at this point from Anacortes, Washington, going to play next year at Compass Prep High School in Arizona, rocketing up boards. He only moved up 1 spot for Rivals, but they were pretty early in moving him up their rankings. They had him 61st in their latest rankings, and then this time with their update, they moved him up to 60th. So again, a guy who was barely top 75 at most other outlets, not even in the top 100 at a handful of outlets not that long ago, is now 60th at Rivals. He was very productive during the Pangos All-American camp. He's been very productive on the UIBL circuit. But Mark Few and the Zags, or at least Gonzaga coaching staff, is watching him this week. We were getting updates from Inside the Kennel, the 24/7 Gonzaga sports reporter, and talking about Fogle putting up really good games in front of Gonzaga's coaching staff. This is a high priority target for Mark Few and the Zags. He wasn't before. It felt like he was almost waiting for an offer from Gonzaga, but he has now received said offer. He is visiting Spokane over Hoopfest weekend, June 28th, 29th, and the staff is very invested in getting him on campus. It helps that he went from 6'5" to 6'7". He's growing. He's still developing. His game is improving. He has looked good against higher level competition, which was a question mark that a lot of people had about him playing at the 2A level in Anacortes. Now that he's proven he can play against higher level competition, he'll get a whole season to prove that at Compass Prep in Arizona. And Gonzaga wants to get that commitment before he shows what he can do. I think that's kind of the storyline here, is that they want to get him on campus in Spokane for Hoopfest weekend. They want to show him around. He's been on campus before. He's somebody who's grew up rooting for Gonzaga, watching the Zags. So I think they feel like if they can get him on campus, they can get a commitment, and then he can go kill it at Compass Prep next year. And everybody will be like, wow, how do we let Gonzaga get that guy? That's the hope that the staff has. That's the hope that I have. And I think it's a very realistic outcome for Davis Fogle at this point. Well, we're going to switch gears for our final segment. The Big East has new media partners. What does that mean for Gonzaga? Also talking the Big 12 looking to make a seismic change that will impact all of college athletics in a significant way. Also will have ramifications for Gonzaga, and we're going to get to that in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still any patents, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are switching over to talk a little bit of conference realignment. More specifically, we're going to talk about the 2 conferences that have been most connected to Gonzaga in terms of realignment at this point, the Big 12 and the Big East. We're going to start with the Big East because a lot of the conversations that I have had on this show are that Gonzaga's ability to get in the Big East are predicated on the Big East's continued negotiations for a new media rights deal. The expectation that Gonzaga would be a draw that would help them get more money out of potential media partners because of Gonzaga's TV power, because of how much the studios love being able to show Gonzaga games on TV. They love having those late night slots covered by getting Gonzaga on the screen. So the Big East has now agreed to a media rights deal. They're still finalizing some of the details, but there seems to have been a push for them to, stay with Fox Sports. There was always an expectation. They signed like a 13-year deal or 12-year deal 12 years ago when this split with the AAC happened, and it was this huge media deal for them at the time. And the expectation was always that as they kind of got closer to that running out, that they would find a way to extend that and continue. It's been profitable for both sides, and that is the case. They're going to continue to operate with Fox Sports. Big East games will continue to be on FS1, but they are adding other media partners in NBC Sports and TNT. And NBC Sports effectively means that games will be on streaming services, on the streaming service Peacock. And for TNT owns Max. So you will see Big East games on FS1, on Fox Sports, and now also on Peacock and Max next season. That is the expectation going forward. They're still working on this. The linear networks are involved as well. So you're going to see, so TNT will have games, NBC will have games as well. Like, it's not just going to be streaming services, but that is a part of this upcoming deal, is the opportunity to get Big East games on Peacock, on Max, on TNT, on NBC Sports, and continuing on Fox Sports as well. CBS Sports remains a partner with the Big East, but it is unclear at this point what that partnership is going to look like. They're still in negotiations. And what the Big East was able to do when you're negotiating with a partner and you don't have any other, you only have one other relationship with Fox Sports, your leverage is somewhat limited. When you now already have 3 partners, you got a lot more leverage. So the CBS is going to have to scramble to make a package offer that works for the Big East, or else the Big East might just drop CBS. That's a very realistic possibility at this point, is that CBS doesn't get very involved. Now, CBS is I believe they're owned by Fox, or there's a relationship with Fox. So again, all the companies kind of blend together, quite frankly. So it's not going to be a huge deal for CBS, but it is a factor here in terms of where you're going to be able to watch Big East games next year. But the main story here is, what does this mean for Gonzaga? And right now, nothing. It doesn't really mean anything, but it's going to mean something. We just don't exactly know what. Part of that is because we haven't seen what these deals look like. We haven't seen the length. We haven't seen the value. Those are, I mean, by the time you're listening to this, it's possible we have that data, but as I'm recording it right now, we do not. How much money the Big East is getting from TNT, from NBC Sports, from Fox Sports, from CBS is a factor here. And then what the contract looks like. Are there stipulations regarding conference realignment? Are there stipulations regarding the conference needing to stay together? Like, what is that? Are there there's a lot of different scenarios that being able to see that contract, or at least have somebody spit out the relevant portions of that contract, are going to help us understand what this could mean for Gonzaga. One thing that it does mean is if the Big East is not desperately looking for partners to come in to help, make them more money and be TV media partners with them. If the Big East is not actively searching, that's probably not great for Gonzaga. I don't think that this is bad news for Gonzaga. I just don't think it's not good news either. It's just news about the Big East. But when if the Big East was starting to get desperate, if they weren't feeling like they were getting the respect, the money, the guarantees from some of those media partners that they wanted, that could have been when they would go to Gonzaga or go to those partners and say, hey, what happens if we get a guaranteed 8 p.m. slot for you every single night with Gonzaga playing whomever? Gonzaga's hosting Butler, Gonzaga's hosting Georgetown, Gonzaga's hosting Marquette, Creighton, whomever, and we can get you that game every Thursday at this time. They could go to those partners. The partners would be interested. But that's something we know. The media deals, the media companies love Gonzaga. They want Gonzaga because they want those games. They want those late slides. late slots, their TV power is really high. One of the top in the entire college basketball landscape in terms of people getting eyeballs on them when they're on TV. That is really impactful for these media companies. So for the Big East to maybe not be feeling that strain anymore could make them less likely to aggressively pursue Gonzaga in the short term. But it's still a bonus for them. And if they find out that, hey, for Gonzaga, if the media deal is lucrative, that may engage them more and like, hey, we're willing to make this move to the Big East, even though it's a lot of travel for us and it's extra costs, because the benefit that we're getting from these media rights deal is now worth it in our perspective. So it's possible that this does help Gonzaga feel like the Big East is a more reasonable solution. All of this is more or less speculation on my part. There have been conversations about Gonzaga and the Big East, but not a lot of direct conversations between the two. So right now, we're not really sure what it means, but it's definitely worth continuing to keep an eye on. Similar situation with the Big 12. This news came out on Thursday morning, very shortly before I hit the record button here. The Big 12 is considering working with a private equity firm, in which case that said firm, which is called CVC Capital Partners, based in Luxembourg, would offer somewhere between $800 million and $1 billion in order to get between a 15 and 20% stake in the Big 12 conference. Folks, private equity is coming to college athletics. It is barreling its way into college athletics. This is a monstrous potential move in college athletics. It affects everything. This is huge. There's really not, I promise I'm not overselling it. This is a big deal. The exact specifics of how it's a big deal somewhat are remain to be seen. It depends how, first of all, if this happens, if other conferences try to get involved in doing this, like what maybe happens from here is a little bit murky, but it's clear that it's going to have a seismic shift. Even the fact that this conversation is happening, it may not happen. As we're recording right now, there are Big 12 presidents who are not happy about this, who are not greenlighting this. That doesn't mean they won't be convinced. That doesn't mean their vote won't matter. If they get a majority, if they get a 75%, it can go forward. But it's not guaranteed that this is happening, and it may fall apart. But if it falls apart, it's really just temporary. Whether it means the Big 12 finds another partner, whether it means the Big 10 or the SEC or the ACC, who's very desperate right now, they say, look, that's a good idea. We're going to try to do something like that too. And those presidents, those athletic directors, they may be a little bit less concerned about it because they adapt or die. Like the ACC's in trouble, so they got to go do something like that. So the portion of this money would go towards the Big 12 schools. The Big 12 schools would then get much closer to making the amount of money that the Big 10 schools are making with their new media rights deal. Basically, the Big 12 doesn't want to be considered the third behind the SEC and the Big 10. And this is an opportunity for them to get their schools paid on the same level as the Big 10 and close to the same level as the SEC. Now, there's likely stipulations in any agreement that would come together that the Big 12 has to stay together. They can't have teams jumping conferences. Whether it means they wouldn't be able to add schools is up in the air. I don't see why the equity firm would prevent them from adding schools if they felt that it was going to, increase the TV watchability and increase some of that stuff. Again, the same questions we already have about Gonzaga joining the Big 12 would still exist. Gonzaga's not going to get the same share as football schools. They're going to get a smaller share. What does that look like? It's hard to say. But if all the Big 12 schools are making a whole bunch more money, even if Gonzaga's share is much smaller, that's still more money than they're going to get from the Big East than they're going to get from this Pac-12 Mountain West reverse merger, whatever happens there. So this makes it even more appealing for Gonzaga to join the Big 12. But again, it's not up to Gonzaga. It's up to the folks in the Big 12 conference whether they want to make this move or not. So this happening to the Big 12 or being discussed, big shift, big conversation, big piece for college athletics in general, but it does have some potential ramifications for Gonzaga as well. We have not heard much on conference realignment this offseason. I suspect it'll pick up in conversation as we get into the doldrums, the July, August, Septembers of the offseason. But for right now, it's kind of quiet on that front. But these moves that the Big East is making, that the Big 12 is potentially making, definitely will have an impact on that conversation going forward. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Shout out to those everyday listeners. Shout out to those of you hanging out with us on Discord as well. Again, if you want to get involved on Discord, just Click the link in the show notes, audio and video platforms. It's free to join. You can come hang out. 350 plus of us talking Zags hoops all the time. Be back with some more recruiting talk on Friday's show, and then get into next week, get you up to date on what's going on with Anton Watson as the NBA draft approaches, get you going forward on more of the season in review episodes and everything else going on in Zag Nation. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, as always, go Zags.